Okay, I'm Anjali Gopalan,
Yeah,
and I work for the NAS Foundation India Trust, which is an HIV/AIDS service organization. We are basically based in Delhi, but we have one program in Bombay, in Mumbai, and Chennai. Um, we have multiple programs. We have working both on prevention and care. We have a program with the gay community. We have a program with young people, a peer education program. We have a program where we look at development through sport. That's the program which also works out of Mumbai and Chennai. And we have a home-based care program where we work with over 100 families, children in 100 families in the city. And we have a care home for children living with HIV who are orphaned. So that's pretty much what we do. And of course, advocacy is something that runs through all of our work. HIV was very much the lens through which I started work with the gay community here. I started work with HIV in '86 in the US, and it was very much a disease that was decimating the. Just switch off that light from there. That was decimating the gay population. Just switch it off. Yeah, decimating the gay population. And when I decided to move back to India in '94, it made sense to take this work. 1 second, let me just look at this light has gone off. And seeing that nothing was being done with the gay community here, I felt it was critical to work with the community because we had seen what had happened. We had seen what had happened with the gay community in the West. So it made no sense for us not to learn lessons from that and be able to transfer that here, so at least we could try and avoid the same thing happening to the community here. That's how we decided to work with the gay community initially. Actually, it was one of our first programs. Yeah, actually, it's interesting because when we started this work in '95, there was only one other gay organization, and we are not a gay organization. But for us, it was a question of rights. It was a question of everyone having, it was our philosophy and our thinking always has been that everyone has the right to access care, to access benefits. Everyone, we're a democracy and there's no reason why some people should be excluded. And for what reason? There's no logical reason to exclude people because they're not heterosexual. To me, that made no sense. So yeah, at that time, I guess it was radical. I never thought of it as being radical because for me it was a question of rights. But yeah, no one had really worked with the community. In Delhi, there was nothing. In northern India, there was nothing. I think it's a question of understanding or believing in a certain philosophy and taking it from there. So for us, it was, I didn't see it as being extremely radical or anything. I just did something that I thought was right to do. I've been questioned from many points of view. Clearly, from the community, from the gay community, I was questioned because I was a straight woman doing this work and they couldn't understand it. And I said, listen, no one else is doing it, so I'm doing it. What's stopping you? There were questions from the religious right. There were questions from the progressive left. Everyone was questioning what was the need for working with these people. And to me, to even address people because they're different from the majority or so-called perceived majority, and even calling them these people made me even more determined to fight towards ensuring that we at least put on the track of working to ensure that people have their rights. And I think that's what made us challenge the anti-sodomy law, which we did in 2001. And we got a very good judgment in 2009 from the Delhi High Court. But again, religious groups have challenged that. So we were in the Supreme Court, and now we're waiting for their judgment, which should happen soon. So yeah, there were people who were questioning, but I don't see any reason why that should stop anyone from doing what they really truly believe in. So I don't think it's such a big deal. I just think it's important that we do what we think is right. And there's no reason for people to be denied their rights because they're gay. I mean, where's the logic? If there was some logic, I'm willing to even listen to arguments, but no one has been able to convince me to the contrary. So I see, I mean, it's something that I believe in, and it's something that I will fight for till the end of my days. So it's not something that I'm going to stop working on. I think some fabulous changes have happened. Over the years, a lot of groups have come, which are LGBT groups, which were not there when I started my work. So it's very fabulous to see that happen. It's really nice to see young people now being able to be more open about their sexuality, to talk about these issues, because this is not something that you saw happening even in the 90s in this country. But now it's so lovely, there are so many young people and so many groups, LGBT groups. So I think we have started that walk down that path, and I'm hoping that, I don't know if it will happen in my lifetime, but one would want to see rights secured, the same rights secured for the LGBT community that all other Indians take for granted. The right to marry and the right to adopt and the right to whatever we take, that this country's citizens take for granted. I think everyone should have access to that. I think lobbying will be something that has to continue. You can't not lobby. How you do it is critical. I don't think our politicians have reached a stage when they will openly take a stand. No. But it's very important for us to keep at them, to keep at bureaucrats, not to, to at least keep them engaged in this discussion. And I'm sure that change will happen. It will take time. If you look at some countries like Spain, for example, Spain is a fairly religious Catholic society, yet it has some of the most progressive laws for the LGBT community. So I was just looking up and kind of trying to research how did it happen in Spain. And it's really interesting because I think it happened when a lot of younger parliamentarians came in. And unfortunately in our country, the average age of parliamentarians, the young ones, is 80. So I think we have a long battle ahead of us. But it's critical that we keep hammering and advocating for change. It'll happen. One of the ways to do it is through the courts, but not everything can be done through the courts. For example, marriage, adoption, all these other issues can't happen through the court. It has to happen through Parliament. So it's very critical for us to keep engaging with them and not losing our cool, because it's really easy to get frustrated and say, oh my God, no one, it's so impossible to engage with these people. But I always tell friends of mine that we can't afford to alienate them. We have to have that conversation all of the time. And it has to be done at one level very quietly. Because otherwise it's very easy. It's difficult for them also to take a public stand. I understand that at some level, right? So we need to keep advocating, and that's something I'll keep doing. Slowly, whether it's with politicians or bureaucrats or the intellectuals in this country, it's very important to get them on our side. Our country has never been very committed to health as an issue for our people. We don't have a health system which is responsive, especially for our poor. The health system still discriminates against the poor, against marginalized communities. I don't see any major change that has happened in the last few years, at least from the last 20 years that I've been working here, 18 years that I've been here. But the one thing that has been different has been the response to HIV. because I think HIV positive people were involved in the response. So to some extent, the government did respond, which is not true for other diseases. For example, if you look at cancer is a big issue in this country. People die in pain, especially the poor. They can't even get access to pain medication. So they die horrible deaths. Cancer medications are one of the most expensive in this country. So if you're poor and you have cancer, you actually die in pain. So we have a long way to go in terms of what we can do for our people in the area of health. I don't think the government is close to even touching. It's not even at the, being able to touch the tip of the iceberg. It's not happening. It's really sad because at least in our country, we did have a health system where poor people could go to government hospitals. Those government hospitals still exist, but people have to buy their own drugs very often. People have to buy everything, right from syringes to cotton wool. It's not uncommon. Recently, I know someone who died because they went into a hospital in which the oxygen cylinders were not working, and that woman died. So it's criminal what happens, right, in the name of healthcare. And what's worse is the government is now focusing on what they're calling public-private partnership. So in the name of public-private partnership, the poor are being even further marginalized, right? It's just awful what happens. So I think on the health front, we've lost the battle. I don't know. How do you hold a really corrupt government and bureaucracy? How do you hold them responsible? And people are, I don't think people have the energy to even be able to talk about these issues. Especially for the poor, it's really, really hard. And it's very difficult, I don't know. It just seems quite hopeless. We don't support financially, for example. But if there's an issue, I mean, very often I'm the one who's there dealing with the police and, finding a place for people to stay or things like that. So I do a lot more of the practical taking care of issues because I don't know how else to help. I do it more because we're also not funded to do that work. So I do it because I've been able to raise the resources for various other programs and I can do it, right? And very often I have to make people stay here or in my house. But that's not the answer. We need a more systemic response so that people can actually take a stand and so that we can actually bring change. That can't happen unless there's a systemic response. But I don't see that happening. We have not had the kind of response that should have been there. For example, there aren't enough LGBT groups providing services. And I believe that if you don't provide services, you can actually not advocate for change. I think both are flip sides of the same coin. You can't have one. It's like telling women, okay, we've given you a law against domestic violence, but the woman can do nothing with that law because if she's being violated, she has nowhere to go. So what's the grand idea of having a law when the services are not in place to ensure that people get taken care of? So I think the same thing has happened with the LGBT movement. Except for maybe Sangani in Delhi. There's no one else. That's what I'm saying. You have to keep at it, It will happen. It'll take time. But I believe that without adequate services being provided for people, we cannot bring about change. It's not happening. Not happening. You can't. But no one wants to fund services. Let me tell you, none of these donors want to fund services. So they want to fund advocacy. And I've always questioned donors, how can you see advocacy without services? It's all very well for me to advocate for change. I can do it. But what happens to people who require those services? How are they going to be able to take the stand that they need to take if the services are not there, if they're not protected, right? It is an issue. Huge issue. There's no one else in northern India. It's crazy. So, and how much can they do? And they don't get funded. It's ridiculous. There's no money for a group like this, which is doing such fabulous work. So, for me, it's really, I will continue helping because I don't know how else to help Sangani. And I think what they're doing is really phenomenal. And not many people do it. Because I know services always take, we run a care home for children. I know how difficult it is to run that. So I admire Sangani for what they're doing, and I'm really angry with donors for not funding a program like that. It makes no sense. So I don't know what these donors are doing, what games they're playing. It doesn't make sense to me. You can't say that, we support LGBT rights. How are you supporting it? How are you helping if you don't put your money where your mouth is, and you have a group like Sangani there and you're not willing to fund them? Makes no sense to me, right? So I think donors also play their own games. But I don't see it being translated into work at the ground level. And without that, we are not going to be able to bring change. People need to be supported if they're going to take certain stands. And if they're not supported for that, we're in deep trouble. Very often, a lot of work can actually be done without much of resources, if you have the basic infrastructure in place, right? But the problem very often is that that basic infrastructure is also not there. So, so groups like Sangani, for example, get very badly targeted. And for them to continue doing the work they're doing it under circumstances of grave harm to themselves, right? They're doing it in an environment which is so negative, and it can be very frightening. There are two young women running that show. Where is the support? No support. And it's happened so often. Their neighbors have called them all kinds of things. They've called that place a whorehouse. Not that a whorehouse is a bad thing, but calling them that, they're pimping girls. And here are these two women who are, are doing such a fantastic job, and it's not easy, right? That's what I'm trying to say. So I think it's critical. That our government starts looking at services across the board, whether it is for women in difficult conditions, gay men. They also. There have been so many cases where gay men have had to run away from home because family members have been threatening them, and there's no place for them to go. So the situation for people from the community is very difficult, and there are no services available, period. None, zero. Look at this huge country. There are hardly anybody providing services for the community. It's crazy. And especially if you're a woman, if you're a gay woman and you're in trouble, besides Sangani, I can't think of anyone else in the entire northern belt who can help. And they're not getting supported. What are we doing? I think there is more acceptance of the Hijra community, of the transgendered community, than there is of gay men or lesbian women. But that doesn't mean that they're not discriminated against. As a matter of fact, the community At one level, there is acceptance because there is a religious sanction in Hinduism to hijras, for hijras. But on the other, they still, hijras will say that, it's difficult for them to get jobs, it's difficult for them to integrate into society. But in the last few years, there has been some change in terms of, in some states like Tamil Nadu, they've actually started, they've changed the format of forms in colleges where they have a transgendered, where you can actually identify as being transgender. They have separate toilets. But I think Tamil Nadu has been the exception. It's been one of the few states that maybe the only state that has really been very progressive about it. But I think the hijra space is a very unique space. If you look at the various genders, this is the one space that is extremely unique. It is a space that has acceptance. It is a space that has allowed for a lot of young men from rural areas who may have been gay, and this was the only space they could access.